So, how do you get them to do it? By telling them that they're superior to women, and as a consequence of that superiority, they have a moral and ethical obligation to take responsibility for the care and protection of those inferior women and their children. By stroking their egos, you tell them how much bigger and stronger and smarter they are, and that Cupcake here would never ever be able to survive without a husband, and it's your duty as a big, strong man to provide for her. To shirk this duty is to turn in your man card, because those fragile, delicate, silly women need a big he-man like you to take care of them. If you see one of those poor, inferior women in danger, you'd better be willing to step up and intervene, or we'll have to reevaluate just what we think of you. And if you do, well, there's a good man. All of that was benevolent sexism against women, and women have been complicit in it all through history, because it was of greater benefit than harm to them. And of course, it's very much a double-edged sword, because the assumption of inferiority that ensured most women in the past got what they absolutely needed out of men was precisely what made it impossible for a few women at the upper reaches of society to enjoy the independence their socioeconomic status could have purchased for them. It wasn't until our technological, social, economic, and political progress had reached the point where women were no longer quite so dependent on the willing investment of individual men for their bare survival that what had been benevolent sexism turned hostile to more and more women. The moment that the assumption of female intellectual, emotional, and physical inferiority became more harmful than beneficial to women, or harmed more women than it benefited, that assumption began to shift in our cultural consciousness. And what's happened? Over the course of a century, we've completely flip-flopped from a consensus that men are intellectually, emotionally, and physically superior to women, to one where women are intellectually, emotionally, and morally superior to men. The less necessary men's individual willing investment becomes to women, the swifter the immersion of the mainstream into a paradigm where the concept of woman is viewed as the ideal, and the concept of man subject to contempt, criticism, hostility, and distrust. Just ask Roger Ebert, Hannah Rosen, or any number of other writers who get space in national mainstream media. And what makes me believe so strongly that feminists have always had the causality of sexism against women backwards? That is, that its primary purpose has not been to oppress, but to elevate, that it's always been benevolent, and that hostile sexism is simply the other edge of that knife, that women were not protected and provided for and sheltered because they were seen as inferior, but that their requirement for protection, provision, and sheltering was best served by viewing them as inferior. Well, who's considered inferior now? And yet, even though we now view men as emotionally and intellectually inferior to women, we don't seem willing to afford them the generosity of society's protection and provisioning, or our help and support, the way we used to do for women, do we? Instead, we're legislating ever more protections away from men, like VAWA and the Dear Colleague letter, and more burdens onto them, like child support for children born out of wedlock, or smaller arrear sums that will result in jail time. We tolerate politicians like Harriet Harman expounding on the unnecessariness of fathers, and we tolerate it at virtually the exact point in history that men were having their rights to their children stripped even further in UK courts, and even as the London riots were being blamed on absent fathers. At the same time, we're just as interested as we ever were in seeing women provisioned and protected, though different factions of society certainly disagree on why and how that should be managed, while traditionalists view this as the continuing responsibility of individual men and are willing to place expectations and limits on women who are taken care of in this way. Feminism has managed to perform a mainstream renegotiation of our pervasive benevolent sexism against women in such a way as to extract maximum benefit for women at little to no cost or limitation to women themselves. They demand women be fast-tracked into top jobs with women-only shortlists and gender quotas, all while claiming women are just as capable as men. They do this while simultaneously pushing for more social programs to assist women alone in areas where they're already advantaged compared to men, areas like homelessness, mental health, and violent victimization, because women are uniquely harmed by these things and therefore need more help. They demand that women be kept as safe as they'd be in a harem guarded by eunuchs, all while they participate in a culture of binge drinking and casual hookups, and all while demanding that none of the necessary limitations and responsibilities involved in making them safe should be borne by those women. And all of mainstream society scrambles to give them what they demand, even though it requires infantilizing those women and shoehorning men and government into the role of patriarchal caretaker. Through the gobbledygook of postmodernism, junk social science, the cunning employment of identity politics, and the construction of an invisible flying spaghetti monster known as the patriarchy, we've managed to externalize all of that benevolent sexism. Women still need extra help, provision, protection, and support, not because they're inferior, but because men are dangerous, dominating scum, while women are disadvantaged, and the invisible woo-woo patriarchy oppresses them. Women need more encouragement in school, even when they're dominating, more funding to start small businesses, even though more of them already do, more protections in sexual assault cases, even though none of the multitude of protections enacted since the 80s have managed to convince more women to report their assaults. More protection from battering husbands, even though women are more likely to instigate violence and face few real-world barriers to leaving. More anti-discrimination policies, more gender quotas, more workplace protections, more everything than men. Not because women aren't every bit as tough and strong and capable and intelligent and awesome as men. It's because patriarchy. It's not that women are inferior. Hell no. It's because they're still seen that way, even though they really aren't. While in the past women got a substantial informal discount in criminal court, from being charged to being convicted to serving time, because they were fragile little flowers who were too silly to know what they were doing and would never, ever, ever survive prison, well, now they get a codified sentencing discount in the UK because society disadvantages women and privileges men. They need excuses made for them not because they're inferior, but because patriarchy. See how that works? And because we've externalized our sexism in this way, as it relates to women, where we've defined women as part of an oppressed group and men as part of a privileged group, well, if a woman can't make it to that board of directors chair, it was obviously because of discrimination. If she did make it, even if it was due to diversity policies, we still have to make a big deal, pretending she's as good as any man there and will obviously just do just as good a job, even when the only available evidence tells us the opposite. If a man made it there, it was male privilege. If he didn't, even if it was due to the negative consequences of those diversity policies, well, it's because he just couldn't cut it. Women are strong, but they need extra protection and help, not because they're not strong, but because of invisible forces comprised of social pressures and cultural norms conspiring to keep them subjugated. Women are intelligent and capable, but they need more encouragement and school and gender quotas in employment, not because they're not intelligent and capable, but because the political machine and corporate structures don't value women's intelligence and capabilities the way they should, and they need to be made more women-friendly. If girls are lagging behind boys in math, it's the system that's to blame, and it needs changing, because girls are every bit as good as boys at math. But when boys suffer under those changes, it's because they're unable to adapt, and what the hell is wrong with those little buggers anyway? If a man can't outperform a woman, with one hand tied behind his back, he doesn't measure up, and the moment he doesn't measure up, we don't have to care about him anymore. But if he does outperform her with one hand tied behind his back, he's an asshole oppressor who bullied his way to the top. Woe betide the man who holds open a coffee shop door for the wrong woman because he's not taking her strength and independence seriously. At the same time, society had damn well better hold career doors open for women, or you're going to hear about it. Do you see how all of that works? Our male-dominated society has always been gynocentric. The gynocentrism is where the male domination all came from. And all of that arose from a multitude of decisions on the part of women through history, right back to our early hominid grandmothers who manipulated and rewarded men and cheated the system to get the best possible deal at the smallest cost. And where does this leave men today? Exactly where they always have been, scrambling to be what women want and need, or be invisible and unworthy of consideration, and being criticized and shamed when they fail. The difference now is that because the options and desires of women have become this huge, wide-open meadow of unlimited choice, filled with a million new and conflicting demands to place on men, being what women want and need is turning into an impossibility. Is it any wonder, with all of these expectations and no one who could possibly live up to them, that women are getting less happy all the time? And all of that said, I'm going to just leave you all with a link to a very apt bit of comedy by Brian Scott McFadden from an appearance he did a couple of years ago on Letterman. And I'm going to challenge my male viewers to compile a list of similar things that they would want in a woman, just for comparison. So I guess that's really all I have to say about that. And I won't be seeing you guys for at least a week, so I guess I will see you next Tuesday or Wednesday.